So we're going to get started. We're going to be recording. First of all, I just want to say how nice it is to see all of you. It wasn't clear to me if I should even do another series of classes because it's like people were zoomed out. But we got more signups for this one than ever before. So I don't know. I think it might be just the topic and the time of year, and we're all just trying to figure out what's next while we're still in it. And it's not an easy thing to do. I just want to acknowledge that. I'm Beth, and I'm very happy to see all of you. And I hope you put whatever your name is on your box, and I appreciate that way we can know who each other are. I want to let you know that Silver Lace is helping out with, she's going to help us with some screen sharing so that I can keep the box big so I can see your faces, and she'll do this screen sharing. She's a co-host together with Rebecca and Leslie. So if you're having any issues with technology, you go to participants and you'll see who the hosts are and just ping one of them. I will not be able to help you with that. I want to also welcome Rabbi Laura Rumpf, who is with us today. She is just hired. I'm so excited. Some of you know, some of you don't know, I'm retiring October 1st. And Rabbi Laura has been hired to become the new head of Project Kavod, the Jewish education project here. So I'm so happy you're here. And she's a Seattle native. You'll learn more about her as time goes on, but I just wanted to welcome you and just tell you how thrilled we are to have you with us. I'm going to also mention that the chat, here's the way the chat works. I will try to follow the chat. If you write short things, I can follow it. If you write really long things, it's harder for me to follow it. If you write to me personally, it will not be saved, but if you write to the group or to Silver Lace, then it'll get saved. And I can read it later or you can just send me an email afterwards if you want to write me something longer. But I will try to respond to comments that in the chat as we go along the way. But please, no political comments. You can say personal things, but not comments about groups of people that are generalizations. We just we want to keep that kind of rhetoric away from these conversations. So and the other thing is to please mute as you go, and if you aren't muted by accident, you get off mute. One of our people will mute you, and don't take that personally. It's just sometimes people accidentally unmute themselves. We'll take care of you. All right, so we're going to jump in. We are asking the question, what does it mean to return to a world after transformative events happen in isolation? And I want to really be clear, we are not yet returned. We are not yet in a place, some people more than others. This Delta variant is very frightening, especially if you're somebody with medical conditions, or you have somebody in your family with medical conditions. Like, we just don't know what's next. But we're trying to figure out, like, what are we going to take away from this whole, this whole experience we've been having? And it's more than COVID. I don't even want to start the whole list. How do we return from that? We're going to look at a story from the Bible this week about a person who went through a very transformative event in isolation and how he responded to it. Some of you will be familiar with this story, some of you will not. It's a story about Elijah, the prophet. He is a 9th century BCE Israelite prophet. He was a prophet during the reign of a king called Ahab, who was not such a great guy, as most of the kings of that time were not. They did not follow God's ways, and that's why we needed the prophets to get them on the right path. The king had a Phoenician wife, Jezebel, who brought in and supported the worship of foreign gods. Things are not good. There's a drought going on. Our story happens right after a dramatic scene in which on Mount Carmel, where Elijah proves that these foreign gods are false and that the Lord God of Israel is the true God. And it's a very, very dramatic scene. It would take us way too long to read through everything, but he challenges 250 prophets of these foreign gods basically to a duel on the mountain. You try to get your God to accept your offering, and I'll get the Israelite God to accept our offering, and whichever one accepts it will know is the true God. And of course, the false gods, don't accept the God. Nothing happens. And when Elijah says, "Okay, God, show them who's God," basically a fire comes down from heaven and accepts this offering. And the people who are watching all say, "The Lord is God, Hashem Hu Elohim," which is actually the last words we say on Yom Kippur at the end of the day. We're saying, okay, we get it now. And so all the people accept God after this dramatic, fiery show. But then Jezebel finds out, the queen, and then he kills the 250 prophets of the false gods. Jezebel finds out and says, "I'm going to kill you." He has to run. And we're going to pick up the story. He has run, he is afraid for his life, and he's isolated all on his own. And I'm going to ask this. We're going to go to screen sharing now for those of you for whom screen sharing is more helpful. I'm going to actually put into the chat box. Just a second. As soon as it gets to full screen here, I'll put it in the chat. If anybody prefers, you can download it. I'm going to make the chat the screen share very small so I can see your faces. You can do that too if you prefer to see faces. And thank you, Silverlace, for taking us on this journey. All right, here we're gonna start actually on verse 9. And Elijah is alone. He has fled. He has gone to the mountain of God at Horeb, which is actually Mount Sinai. He has fled all the way from northern Israel to the Sinai desert, to Mount Sinai, and that's where this takes place. And this is a story of revelation. Just like the people of Israel, actually the burning bush happened there too. Moses' personal revelation happened there. The people of Israel received the 10 Commandments at this spot, and now he's at this spot. This is where he's fled to. And I also just want to say, if you don't know all the references I'm talking about, don't worry about it. You don't need to know all the references. I sometimes throw in extra ones just so that, for people who do understand them, you'll take it in. And if you don't worry. There's lots here that you won't need to know all the references. All right, so what happens? Verse 9. Elijah went to a cave. Caves are important. We're going to see a cave again next week. We've all kind of been in caves. I mean, this is the metaphor, right? Womb is also a cave. We'll see that also next week. And he spent the night there. And then the word of the Lord came to him and said to him, "Why are you here, Elijah?" In verse 10, Elijah replied, "I am moved by zeal." Zeal is such a strange English word. It's like strong emotions. I'm trying to think of a better word for that, but it's a strong word for the Lord God of hosts. For the Israelites have forsaken your covenant, torn down your altars, and put your prophets to the sword. I alone am left, and they are out to take my life. What we're seeing here is a man who feels very alone. He thinks he's the only one who cares. He thinks he's the only one who is defending the Israelites. And earlier, this would take weeks to look at the whole story. He actually has heard that there's 100 Israelite prophets that have been hidden, and that are, he's not the only one. And he's just been in this experience where all the Israelites have said, "We believe in God." And yet he feels, and he said, "They are out to take my life." Jezebel's out to take his life. The whole world isn't out to take his life, but he's feeling completely overwhelmed. And I'm the only one who believes in you, God. I'm the only one. And God says, verse 11, "Come out and stand on the mountain before the Lord." And lo, the Lord passed by. There was a great and mighty wind, splitting mountains and shattering rocks by the power of the Lord. But the Lord was not in the wind. After the wind, an earthquake, but the Lord was not in the earthquake. After the earthquake, fire, but the Lord was not in the fire. And I think this is really important that the fire is there, because what did we just have on the mountain, where he has this big dramatic show of display of God's power through fire? It's like, that's not where God is. It's not in these big things. Where after the fire, in Hebrew, a kol demamadaka. This translated as a soft murmuring sound. Some people call it the still small voice, but it's something very, very small. And that is the voice. It's inside. It's not this big displays. And when Elijah heard it, he wrapped his mantle about his face and went out and stood at the entrance of the cave. And then a voice addressed him, same exact question. Why are you here, Elijah? Now, he's just been through a moment of revelation, alone in the cave. And what's his answer? I am moved by zeal for the Lord, the God of hosts, for the Israelites have forsaken your covenant, torn down your altars, and have put your prophets to the sword. I alone am left, and they are out to take my life. It's the exact same words he has before the revelation. And not only that, I checked to see maybe the trope marks, there's cantillation, there's ways to sing this. And that, sometimes it changes. The same words can have different trope marks, different cantillation singing marks, exact same singing marks. So it's not even like you're getting a different tone of voice. He's giving the exact same answer afterwards. And I would argue that the poor guy had no time to process what just happened. He had this remarkable, he's scared, he's had to run for his life, he's been through so much, and he has this quiet moment of revelation, but he can't process it yet. And God says to him, okay, go back where you came from. And God gives him some jobs to do, and one of them is to anoint a prophet to succeed him. Because if you can't process this, you can't be in charge anymore. You can't be a prophet anymore. If you think you're the only one, if you think the Israelites are all horrible, if you think everybody else is bad except for you, you can't be the prophet anymore. And so the story, if it ended here, it would be so sad, but it doesn't end here. So I'm going to take you on a journey with Elijah. What happens to Elijah over time? I'm going to skip. We're skipping some stuff. You get to the end of his life. Elijah and Elisha, the prophet who's going to follow him, are walking together, and this is text number 2. They, Elisha and Elijah, so that's our hero and the guy who's going to follow him, be the next prophet. They were walking and talking, and a fiery chariot with fiery horses suddenly appeared and separated them from each other. And Elijah went up to heaven in a whirlwind. And that is the end of the story of Elijah in the Bible, at least in this part of the Bible. He doesn't die. He goes up to heaven in a whirlwind. And this excites the imagination of the rabbis. He didn't die. What happens to him? So let's see what happens to Elijah now. What's going to happen to him over time? All right. So he was at like 9th century BCE. Malachi is a prophet who's the last of the prophets that we have in the Jewish Bible. He refers to Elijah. This is, he's about 400 years later. And we read these words actually on the Shabbat before Passover in the Haftorah, in the prophetic reading. And it's because Passover, of course, is the prototype day of, the idea of redemption is possible, that things can get better. We can get out of Egypt, whatever Egypt means for us, right? There is that possibility of redemption. So Elijah, we read about Elijah on that Shabbat before Passover, and the verses are, I will send the prophet Elijah to you before the coming of the awesome, fearful day of the Lord. Elijah will reconcile parents with children and children with their parents. And this will be a sign that things are going to be better, that the messianic time is coming. Elijah becomes the one who's going to announce the coming of the Messiah in Jewish tradition. I mean, where does that, here's this guy who's so zealous, he can't even see anything happening, changing. And yet, even by the end of the Bible, he's going to be the one to announce the coming of the Messiah. And it goes on. He will change even more. If anybody has comments or thoughts, responses, feel free to drop something in the chat box. I don't think I've missed anything. So a few lovely private notes, thank you. But feel free to drop a comment in the chat box if you have something to say or a question, or if you didn't follow something, feel free to do that too. All right, so we now have this man Elijah. He is going to bring the Messiah. We actually, there's 3 times when we sing for Elijah, that we welcome Elijah in Jewish tradition. One is at the end of the Passover Seder, because that's a time when redemption, right, is possible, we think, or at least we hope. It's after the meal. It's like, okay, well, let's have the Messiah, or whatever messianic time, however you want to believe that. Yes, Kathy, I think that's so true. Reconciling parents and children is the biggest work of redemption. That would be a whole other series of classes, but yes, isn't that something? Yeah. No, I just lost my, because that's such an important point. Anyway, so Passover, the end of Shabbat, at the end of Shabbat, we welcome Elijah, because the week is about to begin, and like, this would be a great time to because this Shabbat is kind of like a taste of the world to come, a taste of redemption. Let's just keep it going, Elijah, now you want to show up. And then the 3rd time is at Brit Milah, circumcision of every Jewish male, 8 days. There's a special chair for Elijah. So now you're going to see where that comes from. Okay, so, and we'll talk about why. One of the reasons I always heard was because every child could be the Messiah. You know, every child has that potential in them, which is a beautiful, which is also true. It's a beautiful way to think of every new child who comes into the world. But there's another explanation. And so let's see, we're in text number 4, Pirkei de Rabbi Eliezer. And this is a text that was written down 8th, 9th century CE. So we're jumping ahead time. Remember, all these texts though were oral first before they were written down. So we don't really know exactly when they're from, but we know when they were written down. So, but we can see sort of time going on here. In Pirkei de Rabbi Eliezer, they write, they're going through a list of people who flee and God saves them. And we're going to get to Elijah. He's the last one. Learn that everyone who flees is saved. Elijah, may he be remembered for good, arose and fled from the land of Israel and was saved. As it is said, and he arose and did eat and drink. We didn't get those lines, but before he gets to the cave, he's like alone under a bush and God feeds him. And there the Holy One, Blessed One, was revealed to Elijah. And God said to him, "What are you doing here, Elijah?" We just read this, right? And Elijah answered, "I've been very zealous." Right? And we read that whole part too. And the Holy One said, "You're always zealous. You were zealous in the place called Shittim on account of immorality." So what this is referring to, interestingly enough, I wasn't sure if I was going to have time, but I'm going to sneak this in. According to Jewish tradition, I'm going to tell you a very brief other story in the Bible. On the day that the Mishkan, the sanctuary, was dedicated in the desert with Moses, we're going back in time. The two sons of Aaron, Nadav and Avihu, brought a fire that they weren't supposed to bring. They did something that wasn't appropriate. There's a lot of, we could do weeks of commentary on this, but whatever their motivation was, whatever it was, they were playing with fire, literally. A fire came down just like in the Elijah story, by the way, on Mount Carmel. A fire comes down and consumes them and kills them. It's like, and I always think about, like, you just can't play around with this kind of power. You can't stick your finger in a socket and think you're going to be okay. And that's what Nadav and Avihu did, no matter what their motives were. According to this, their motives were very zealous. You're like, we're here for God. And God says, this is too much. They die. They get reincarnated. This is Jewish, this is Jewish imagination. They get reincarnated in the person of their nephew, Pinchas, who becomes a priest, who's a high priest. And he, in a place called Shittim, we're going back to our text now, in a place called Shittim, he murdered a couple who were involved in a cultic sexual act in front of the altar, and he killed them in his zealousness. It's the same spirit as Nadav and Avihu. Pinchas is the same spirit then that becomes Elijah. It's the same, according to our tradition, he just gets this zealous spirit just keeps getting reincarnated, trying to like soften it. And God says, so now God is saying, like, when you were in the body of Pinchas, you did the same thing. And now you're still so zealous. By your life, God says, the people of Israel will not observe the covenant of the circumcision until you see it done with your own eyes. You're going to see, because he just said they don't follow your covenant. Well, if you know, what do you call the sorry, this is a little complicated. I hope I'm doing this clearly. If not, send me a chat. What do we call the circumcision? We call it the Brit Milah, the covenant of circumcision. It's a covenant. The circumcision is a covenant. God says, you know what? You say they're not fulfilling the covenant? You're going to go to every circumcision, every Brit Milah, and you're going to witness it. You say they don't do it? I'm going to show you. They're not as bad as you think. Now, what we don't know is how God says this, because in a written tradition, you don't have tone of voice. I would have loved to have heard how this was taught, because it's either you don't think they do anything right. I'm going to show you. You're going to go to every single Brit Milah. You're going to go to every single circumcision, and you're going to see. Or is it said, you don't think they do this? Come on. I want to show you. They're not as bad as you think. You're going to go to every single circumcision, and you'll see. They do it. They haven't given up. You're wrong, but it's okay. Is it a nechemta, as we say in Hebrew? Is it a consolation, or is it a punishment? But in either event, Elijah shows up at every single one, and he sees. And if there is one thing that, not every single Jewish family does this, but it's been pretty consistent for a very long time. Is one of the most consistent things that Jews have done over time. Again, it's not everybody, but it's certainly consistent enough that it, he's wrong. The Jewish people are still here all these years later. I wanted to show you one more text, and I'm also just expecting more comments from you folks. So feel free to chime in, say something, ask a question. So this is from the Zohar. Zohar is 13th century, so we're a few hundred years later again. And this one, there are commentaries that say that Elijah is being punished by coming to every circumcision, and there are others who are saying it's a consolation. But the two things that I said, you can find both. But here, you'll see the Zohar says, and this is the foundational mystical text of the Jewish people, written in, most scholars think it was written in Spain, 13th century. It says, come and see. It's written, what are you doing here, Elijah? And then he says, I've been very zealous for God, for the children of Israel have abandoned your covenant. Here's the word covenant, right? That's what we saw him say. And God says to Elijah, by your life, at every site of circumcision, you will appear. And the mouth that testified this that they don't follow the covenant will testify that Israel is filling the covenant. We have already learned, why was Elijah punished in the presence of the Holy One? Meaning he lost his job as a prophet because he slandered his children. So did the children of Israel abandon the covenant? You might ask, was it black and white or gray? I think here's the thing. They were constantly abandoning the covenant. They were constantly doing the wrong thing and then being brought back, and then doing the wrong thing and being brought back. I mean, the Torah ends at the end, when Moses is they don't enter the land yet, where there's this moment of great hope, and Moses is about to die and they're about to enter the land. And if you read the next parts of the Bible, and then we start the whole thing over again, the Torah starts over again. But if you read the book of Joshua, and the book of Judges, and then the Samuel and Kings, it's just we're not ever done. I mean, and this is such a great metaphor for our lives. We're never done. But Mike, I think your question is really important, because the question is, what do you see? What did Elijah see? What had happened just before this was that all the people, the Israelites, had said, Adonai hu Elohim. God is king, God is God, the Israelite God is God. They had just accepted this. And he could be feeling great. Like, okay, we're on an upswing right now. But he didn't feel it. And it's definitely always been gray. It's always gray. Being human is gray. And I'm in awe. I just want to say I'm in awe of our clergy, our leaders, who just love the Jewish people. And still, we're not so easy. And yet, still there, still helping out, still seeing the good. Kathy says, does God love the zealot or look for ways to temper his aspect of human character? So that's what I'm trying to figure out with this text. I think what we're going to see here is that God loves everybody. And it's the zealousness is not a bad thing. It's what do you do with it? How do you use it? If you think you're the only one, and this is what Elijah's like, I'm the only one, it's not, you don't get anywhere. And so God will temper him over time. And so I think sending him to every Brit Milah was a way of saying, I love you enough to not just, throw you out, not to say like, okay, given you 3 reincarnations, okay, you just can't get over your zealousness. God doesn't say that. God says, okay, I'm going to keep you as you, and you're going to keep showing up. You can see every Brit Milah, you can see every circumcision, you're going to see that, yeah, they're complicated people, but they're okay. And what you did matters. And it's not, you're going to see now what's going to happen to him. He's going to now start showing up in Jewish literature in all sorts of ways. And I'm going to talk about that. I just see Beth wrote a note. It's so difficult to let go of our preconceived notions and embrace change or other paths forward. Yes. And that is exactly what happened to him, Beth. I think he just, in the moment, it happened. He had this amazing experience in the cave, but then it's like 2 minutes later, he walks out of the cave and God says, why are you here? And he gives the same answer because he hasn't had time to come up with a new answer yet. And so then God, our imagination gives him some time. And what happens with the time? Well, first, what happens in rabbinic literature, and this is all through the Talmud, he shows up everywhere in these rabbinic, and the Talmud is the next major Jewish book after the Bible. The Bible is closed, and then the Talmud is rabbinic commentaries and stories, and that closes around the year 600 CE. We don't know exactly, but give or take, just to give you kind of a timeline here. He is always showing up, and we're going to see him next week. That's why I wanted to do this story, because he's going to show up in next week's story at a different cave. somebody else who's been in a cave for a while. But he's the guy who's already been in a cave. So we're going to see him in that story. But in the Encyclopedia Judaica, it says, and this is the final text, in rabbinic literature, there's a redemptive motif associated with Elijah. He heralds the future redemption of Israel. He's the guy who's going to tell us when the Messiah is coming. And we've seen that. And he also will show up when rabbis are disagreeing. He will help solve the problem. He will show up, people have questions. He will help answer those questions. He comes in one person at a time. He doesn't deal with massive numbers of people anymore. He doesn't do this big showy thing on Mount Carmel that he did, in his life. And to prove that guy with fire and the whole show. He now is going to show up one person at a time and help individuals and individual rabbis in particular. Then along comes Jewish folklore. And in Jewish folklore, and these are Jewish stories. And many of you might have heard some of these stories. And if you have a favorite one, you could put it in the chat box. He becomes, well, as it says here, he's portrayed as the heavenly emissary sent on earth to combat social injustice. Many of the stories were used as vehicles for teaching about social justice. So he's one of those people. He's the guy who shows up and takes care of the person that everybody else is ignoring. He's the one who shows up and brings the meal to the family who has nothing to eat for Passover. And he shows up at the door and he'll knock on the door and say, can I join you for your Seder? And the people say, we don't have anything. We'd love to have you. And then he'll come in and magically an entire meal will show up and then he'll disappear. And then included in that will be, money for this family to live on, for the rest of their lives, kind of thing. It's folklore, but it's so beautiful what has happened to this person over time. He does change. He's a great model of going from this, I'm the only one. Nobody else understands. I'm the only good guy, to realizing that there's lots of good people out there. And sometimes they just need a hand. And you take care of them one at a time. Okay, finally there's some comments in here so I can comment. Right before yours, Beth, I didn't see Amy, you wrote, why can't being human be rainbow? Maybe it's not gray. Maybe it's not gray. It's just not binary. Okay, great. Thank you, Amy. I appreciate that. Thank you for noting that. Right, that's the point. It doesn't have to be any one color. It's a lot of colors. That's beautiful. Thank you so much for saying that. And Tracy, what did I miss? Why the Brit Milah is important? Yes. So thank you for asking, because if that wasn't clear, I want to make sure that's clear. Elijah says, they're not following your covenant. That's his answer each time. They're not following your covenant. And so the rabbis who interpret this read it hyper literally. And when they say covenant, they see covenant meaning the covenant of circumcision. And this is, by the way, you can go, oh my gosh, this is so, you can read this two ways. These rabbis, they can make, a mountain out of a molehill, which is true. But this is their art form. This is how I see it. This is their art form. They can take one word and create from that an entire picture, an entire story, an entire theology even. But they have to have the one word to hang it on. They can't just make it up out of nothing. And so I find it, and they could create anything. I just want to say that also. They could take that one word and create all sorts of things. I'm interested in what did they create? What are the values that they are trying to instill by taking that one word and creating something, creating a whole story? And to me, the value they're trying to create here is that each child that's brought into this world is one at a time that we have to value. And Elijah, you're seeing them all as a blur. You're seeing them, at least at that point, you're seeing, you're making generalities. One person at a time don't assume everybody is like every one person at a time. That's what I think they're saying, although I'd be welcome any other interpretations. You know, there's 70 faces to the Torah, as we say. So if you have a different way of reading this, you know, it's also true. But that's thank you, Tracy, for bringing that up. Okay, Monty, you wrote, Rabbi Susan Fendrick commented that we may want justice to come quickly and completely, and sometimes we might listen, quote, slowly to the quieter voices in our midst. Thank you, Monty. That's what Elijah becomes. He becomes that quiet voice. And remember what the revelation was? God's not in the earthquake. God's not in the wind. God's not in the fire. It's in that still, small voice, the kol damama daka. That's where it is. Now, that doesn't mean that we can't do rallies and, you know, that kind of stuff. It doesn't mean that that stuff shouldn't happen. But really, if we want to come out of whatever it is that we've all been through here, and everybody's been through, first of all, everybody's been through something different. And that's the first thing. We can't make assumptions about what people need. And two people can go through the exact same experience and have completely different experiences of it. And so we can't make assumptions. And that, I think that, you know, as I'm talking here, I think that might have been his failing. He just couldn't see individuals. And over time, he does start to see individuals. That's what our tradition does to him. Margaret, you wrote, maybe this experience of abandonment and suffering made him capable of consolation because he needed it so much. Yeah, thank you. But he first had to see it and accept it. And sometimes the people who are the most zealous need the most consoling. And so we can judge them, right? Or we judge, if I'm the zealous one, I judge myself. Really what I'm doing is judging myself. But this is, you know, this just takes time. It just takes time. I mean, you know, I know at JFS, you know, we provide, we don't assume that someone's going to come in the door once and be done. We don't assume that, you know, one therapy session is going to do it. You know, no matter who, and I think there's probably therapists in this room, you know, you don't, one therapy session is not, you know, the answer. And sometimes it's a lot more than you think. Rabbi Laura wrote, I'm appreciating the humility of transformation, revelation being personal and over time, not loud, and over time and not loud, clear and instantaneous. Yeah. I mean, that's what we'd all want. Wouldn't we all just love to know, okay, what's next? Just tell me. You know, and this time of year during Elul, we're thinking about the high holidays and what kind of changes we need to make. And, you know, just tell me what to do, I'll do it. Nope, gotta listen to that voice, that still small voice. It's not gonna be loud. It's not gonna be instantaneous. And that takes humility. And you know what? We could do it again next year too. And every Jewish holiday, you do it again in a different way. So it's not like it's just gonna, it's just, okay, we do it once a year. We're doing this work all the time. Jewish, the great thing about being a Jew is that if you follow all these holidays, you're just getting another chance every month or so. There's another Jewish holiday that's asking you to rethink, you know, what it means to be human in a meaningful way. And each holiday has its own angle into that question. Judy, right? Maybe he evolves from feeling like he needs to solve the problems to serve the people, even one person at a time. I think, Judy, that's a really insightful comment. I think. You know, there's a place. I don't want to say there's no place for the leader, who's, you know, giving, you know, who's going to be in front of a lot of people. But the real transformational change does happen, you know, one person at a time. And the real transformational leader understands that. Either has other people working with them who understand. Like Moses, you know, he was the big leader, but he had Aaron and Miriam. The three of them together led the people out. Moses gets the PR, but Aaron and Miriam, I could do a whole lesson on, you know, why they matter. Thank you. In this month that we're in, just by the way, for those of you who aren't familiar with it, this is called the month of Elul, which is the month leading up to the high holidays, which are the days when we think about personal transformation. It's interesting. This is the only major holidays we have that did not have a Jewish historical event associated with them. It's a real universal message of inner transformation. It's the birthday of the world. Passover is the birthday of the Jewish people, but Rosh Hashanah is the birthday of the world. And there's midrashically in rabbinic imagination, there's events that are associated with these days, but the main thrust of this is really inner work. And this work does not start on Rosh Hashanah. It starts in this month of Elul, the Hebrew month that precedes Rosh Hashanah. We've got, it's all about, so somebody wrote how important this is. We are painting huge swaths of people, with a brush, absolutely. And individuals can be reached and waiting to be cared for if we can choose that. Yes, thank you. That was I think that's part of the message here, as we're leaving this period, or we think about leaving, or what it might mean to ever leave this period of isolation that we've been going through. How do we engage with people that we have demonized or have demonized us? We're all individuals, and safely, by the way. I don't think we have to engage with everybody, but we also don't have to assume we can't engage with anybody. Margaret wrote, is it all about change and transformation, or to sink at true depth into what is and what we already are? Well, that's the revelation, Margaret, I think, is sinking into that place of what we already are. And then, that's what Elijah needed time to do. Maybe that's who he really was all along. And because there are stories of Elijah, that predate this whole thing on the mountain, where he is taking care of one person at a time. And so he needs to go back to that. Perhaps, maybe that was there all, I think it was there all along for him. We should do another series just on Elijah. He's just such a fascinating character. Michal, a message about leadership here is that humility is an essential character trait. Yeah, thank you. And it's hard. And I hope we'll give our leaders a lot of room right now. They're trying. I'm like, every day I think, goodness, I'm not in charge of high holidays this year. Boy, just say thank you if you're a member of a synagogue to anybody who is planning high holidays. Just say thank you. They're like, they've already made plans and now they have to change everything. Like that's just the humble ones, and we have lots of them in this town, in this country, in this world. The ones who aren't making the headlines, they are day in and day out, taking care of all of us. And I would say that about our therapists. I would say that about all my colleagues at JFS. There's just, and the teachers and the doctors and the nurses and that, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. The bus drivers. Humility is something that actually a lot more people have than we give them credit for. I think, anyway, just my 2 cents. Okay, I don't think I missed anybody's comments, but if I did, somebody send me a chat to let me know that what I missed. All right, so we've looked at Elijah, and I kind of want to end with some of these questions that I wrote and see if you have any other comments. I think we talked about this first one. Why isn't Elijah able to change after the experience? Even Elijah took time. Let's give ourselves a little time. What do we need? We're going to need some time. And I'm looking at, faces on here, and I know some of you, and I don't know others of you, but those of you I know, some of you have been through all sorts of things in this last year and a half, in addition to COVID, in addition to all the things that we've read about in the newspaper. You've gone through personal things. That alone would have been enough We need time. But I think Elijah can be an inspiration for us, because he does change over time. And the tradition gives him the space to change over time. And he just needed some time to integrate these experiences. Can we give each other that space? You know, it's one thing for me to give it to myself. Do I have the patience to give it to you too? Or I give it to you, but do I have the patience to give it to me? I mean, some of us are much better at giving it to others and to ourselves, and some of us are better at giving it to ourselves than to others. And then we really have to think about, what do I want to integrate? What do I want to keep? What do I want to hold on to? What do I want to let go of? What do I want to be different? We don't know the answer to those questions yet. And to think that we would is just unrealistic. And Elijah, I think, teaches us that. You know, it's interesting that the tradition, and the final one is about how the tradition was generous with him. And what is it about, what does it take to be generous with each other and with ourselves in terms of time? You know, I'm looking on here, I'm seeing some of my colleagues, and some of you are like having to make major decisions about moving forward at JFS, and, you know, are we going to be in person? Are we not going to be in person? And if you're not at JFS, you're at some other place where that decisions might be being made. Some of us don't have to worry about that. Some of us have been in person all throughout this whole thing. You know, at some point you have to make a decision. I get that. And it's okay to not know yet, and to know that hopefully at some point, you know, you will know, and then you've got to change again, and that's okay. I want to also note, and if you have any thoughts about this as we're wrapping up, feel free to drop in there. I want to note that sometimes this is just, you need a little extra, any of us need a little extra help, or you might know somebody who needs a little extra help. I'm going to ask, there, thank you, Rebecca. This is a flyer about the various services available at Jewish Family Service. Feel free to call us. Or call some other agency or some other organization or whatever it is. Or if you don't know who to call, you can call us and we'll help direct you if we don't have what you need. There's no shame in that, and there's no, our society is like, you know, we can figure this out ourselves. Yeah, I don't know anybody who can figure everything out themselves. I don't know anybody who can do that. And I don't know anybody who doesn't need help somewhere along the way in their life, you know. So if this time feels just completely overwhelming to you and you feel like you can't move, you can't function, or even if it's hard to function, it's hard to move. You know, you don't have to wait till you can't move. Like, don't wait that long. Give us a call, or reach out to whoever you feel can help you, because I mean, that's what Elijah is teaching us. Elijah shows up now one at a time for people, and people let him. And people let him. That's the big thing. People let him, and he becomes the hero. But also the people who he shows up for are the heroes, because I think they let him, and he needs them because he needed to change. So they're doing him a favor by opening the door and letting him in when they don't have any, you know, in the folklore story where they have no food for Passover, and they open the door and say, we have nothing. By opening the door, they're giving him a chance to help them. And you know, sometimes I'm the person who can help, and sometimes I'm the person who needs help. That's true for every single human being, always. So hopefully I'll see you next week. We'll see another cave story from rabbinic literature about, and Elijah will have a cameo appearance in that. And I welcome your thoughts, your comments. You have my email address at the top of the handout. And I do welcome you. And to the people who came for the first time today, who I haven't met before, send me a quick note and just tell me something about you so I know who you are. It's really, I miss being in person where I could actually go up and talk to you. So may you all have a good week, and I will hopefully, God willing, see you next week. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Beth.